Welcome to Uncomfortable, conversations about culture and Christianity. My name is Eric, and today I'm joined by Jess.
Hello, world.
And Alex.
Back again.
You're back again. That's right. How's everybody doing? Everybody hanging in there?
Hanging in.
Just having a good time. Yeah. Nothing to report.
No, I mean, the weather this week, so far, so good. Last couple of weeks, a lot of rain.
It's a good start to a podcast when people know there's nothing to talk about but the weather.
And where are we from? The
Yes.
Midwest.
Exactly. So a couple days together,
pigeonholed us
strung
right there.
together of nice days, I'll take it.
Yep.
A lot of rain.
I feel like there is a weather change because my knees are aching a little bit.
Okay, Grandma.
So,
That's
yeah.
Allergies, they're out.
Oh,
It's all
allergies
of
are
them.
alive and well
Just the
with
season.
everybody.
Shorts. A lot of shorts
Yeah.
now. Everybody's wearing their shorts.
Are you wearing shorts?
No,
Yeah.
Alex
I have
always
full
is.
long boy pants on.
Oh.
A big boy pants on. I don't know. Alex.
I wore the shorts today,
Yeah.
for those wondering.
Yeah. It's good. It's good to be informed about wardrobe,
Yeah.
especially if you're not watching this, which maybe people don't know. Maybe they only listen on audio.
Yeah. Jess, are you wearing shorts?
Maybe.
Maybe.
Go to YouTube.
Whoa.
and
Go to
check it.
I don't think they can even tell. Maybe on
I'm
YouTube.
just saying, maybe,
At-
I feel like I'm the one that's most exposed.
Wow. From
on the
camera.
podcast, on the
from
camera angle. Oh my, no! I'm just go back. I'm wearing pants. Okay.
Just don't go to YouTube anymore.
Yeah.
Actually, we just got so many
was
new
trying
YouTube
to-
subscribers.
I was
It's
trying to be
crazy.
like, just
So
go
uncomfortable
find
now.
out. Okay, yeah, here we go.
YouTube.com/@
Oh boy.
CCC Omaha. You can find the video podcasts there, or you can leave us a review on your favorite podcast aggregator.
Here we go.
That'd be great. But today we're not here to talk about podcasts or shorts or weather.
Or are we?
But I think this
Or-
conversation, this tangent, this our little ADD fit of rage here, kind of speaks to this, and that is: have we lost our ability to think deeply?
Dun, dun, dun.
I mean, yeah, we need sound effects for that. I mean, I question this sometimes, but I think it comes from a place of just scatterbrained ADD. I bounce from one thing to the next, from one project to the next. I was thinking, you work all day, you go home, you're trying to have family time, but then the older your kid, maybe not even the older your kids get, but it just feels like they're always doing stuff and things are going on you're trying to keep track of. And then last night we realized our garbage disposal, the motor in it is pretty much dead. And so I'm like, okay, well now this is in the back of my head.
Yeah.
It's not a huge deal to change a garbage disposal, but it's just every little thing starts adding up and it doesn't slow down. It just kind of keeps going. So, and then we have tools like AI and things like that we're able to kind of supplement our work and maybe make more space to be even more busy. And then that kind of raises the question, is what we're having AI do for us, is that of good enough quality to allow it to do that? And is it actually helping us or just making us a little more chaotic? And at the end of the day, are we able to sit down and read a book? Are we able to sit down and critically think about a situation that we're facing? Or are we just trying to find the quickest way to move on to the next thing?
Yeah, I like you, Eric. I wrestle with it a lot, especially when there's moments I have to really have a thought stream, or whatever they call it, flow state, where I like writing a sermon, or I'm trying to put together something that really takes a good chunk of a few hours to really be creative and all that. Like I have often unable to be found in my office because I've got to go like hide somewhere, even to get away from not even just the distraction of my phone, but the distraction, when you have an office here at the church, and I'm sure other people that have offices that are in a building where there is a lot of opportunity for someone to pop into your office, which I love. I love the social ability and the networking there, but there's moments where I'm like, I just got to get away from all of it and have no interruption, because if I have interruption, I know I'm never going to get through it. And so I have to like schedule some of those pockets throughout my weeks or days to actually get to those spaces. And I'm sometimes amazed how long it takes me to get into it. Like once I get into maybe that flow state or whatever, that deep thinking, I'm surprised time goes by quickly, but oftentimes like just to lock in and get there mentally, it feels like takes longer and longer for me at times. So
I feel like for me, if I'm not careful, like I notice a lot, I have a lot of access points to me. So it's like my computer is connected to me and ads pop up, or I can open multiple tabs, or my phone, or even when I'm at work and my door's open, there's just access points to me where it's like my attention is constantly like shifting from one thing to the next to the next. And even reflecting on what you guys are saying, it's like I can only go so far with a conversation or with a thought, or even give a good thoughtful answer, because there's so many quote unquote tabs open where my attention's going, that, you know, at the end of the day, it's like, did I have that good of an answer? Or like, did I answer that as well as I could? Or did all my time go like 50 different places where if it was in 5, I could have done that really amazingly well? And so, yeah, I think it's a great question to think, ponder.
When I think one of the things where I first started noticing this was just I guess the inability to have a conversation with friends casually without fact checking one another. Like, I think there was a time where you would just sit there and have a conversation, and someone would maybe say something a little off the wall, or throw out a stat that you didn't really think was true, and you kind of just had to go along with it, and maybe you found out later or whatever, but you're just kind of stuck living with that. And then you had to think about it, like, logically, could this actually be real? Could this be something that is true? But anymore, I find myself, someone will say something out of pocket, and I'll just be like on my phone, like searching for the answer, like, is that true? That, you know, and you don't really give yourself any time to critically think about something or come to a logical conclusion on your own. You just want to be told what the answer is and go directly to that. And then you see now that it's kind of led to this era of correctness where we're just all in a battle of who's right or wrong about something. And it's less about thinking or processing, or how does this affect certain people groups, or how does this affect my relationships with others, or I don't know. It's just, it feels like we kind of took any of the mystery out of everything. We've just made it all so like this cut and dry, factual, get to the point, move on.
When we're forced to form an opinion on stuff at hyper speeds, like way quicker than you can even have an understanding on something. And so like, especially in a digital space, it's like, okay, what's your hot take to this? What's your thoughts on this? What's happening? And some of that's formed, and some of it's like, oh, well, someone asks you a question and you're like, I can't be the person that doesn't have an answer to that, even if you don't know. And so it just feels like there's that expectation to, form opinions quicker than you can even really have an opinion, honestly. I mean, an informed opinion. You have to form one before it's informed. And so I think that's a big part of it.
I mean, I think you talk about being informed. It's like we've kind of confused being informed with being formed. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's like we're taking this information and finding even sometimes I don't know, kind of our moral high horse or whatever, and going, well, no, I know I'm right because I am formed. I can go pull up this stat. I can do whatever, and I'm correct. And taking that, and it's almost like this counterfeit version of really becoming the person that you should be and understanding what the topic you're talking about. You're just regurgitating information.
And we want it to in the 3-minute videos or the 20-minute TED Talk. Like, unless you have a job, like, I'm impressed with how many books you read, Alex, but to pat you on the back, because I feel like a lot of people don't take time to read the whole book. Or like for me, I have to read the whole book if I want to understand something. It's like, but we want the 20-minute summarize it, or ChatGPT, please summarize this book for me so that I can have this conversation or write this report. And so we want it quickly, but also I think like our culture has kind of trained us. We'll get into that more, I'm sure, later, but just our culture has trained our attention to expect we can get a lot out of a little and we can produce all of this. But is it really like deep? Is it really substantial?
Yeah. And I think a big question to think about is like, are we outsourcing our ability to think? Like, how much are we outsourcing our ability for our brain, which is a cognitive tool that needs to be exercised, and all of those things, like any other muscle that you want to continue to build and you want to continue to stay sharp or lean or whatever, you have to continue to exercise it. But when oftentimes, instead of my ability to think through something critically or take time to slow down and have an opinion, it's like, well, I don't have time to think about that. So I don't have time to think about how to form this email or what's the right word to use here. And there's pros and cons, but so I'm like, of course I'm going to use AI for something like this. I've got to write a email to my kid's teacher, just asking them something simple, and I want to be nice and sound good and sound professional. Of course, I'm just going to run it through a generator like that because I'm like, I don't have the bandwidth, the emotional bandwidth sometimes to get through that, and something that there's a lot of just formality in it, to not sound cold and like I have no heart and I know how to use punctuation and all that kind of stuff. And so it's just easier to do that. But then there's times where I've caught myself feeling like, but then there's things I probably should not outsource or get an opinion on or find the fact checks, kind of like what you were saying, Eric. And instead of deeply being able to think through it or go pick up a book that talks more clearly through it, then I oftentimes just find myself outsourcing. And then I'm like, oh, my brain hasn't had a workout in a while, you know, because it doesn't need to.
Well, yeah, just the the constant noise. I mean, I don't drive anywhere without music, a podcast, an audiobook, something going on to keep my attention. And I think back to times when I would just drive in silence, and you're kind of left alone with your thoughts. And a lot of times I think silence is like a mirror. Like it's something where it's kind of showing you who you are and allowing you to kind of have self-discovery and to think thoughts that you wouldn't think otherwise, or let you rest in a thought that you would normally just dismiss because you're distracted and you're moving on to the next thing. And we've really lost the patience, I think, to wrestle with these things. Like we just kind of, like you said, we just move on. We're done with it. We want that solution to send the email, to do the task for me. And some of that's really good and helpful. And I agree. I use it too for those reasons. But then when the line starts to blur is where I'm like, that's even something I'm personally struggling with. It's like, okay, when do I need to draw the line and go, no, I need to write this email. Yeah. I need to like do this task. I need to be the one who is, because then where does responsibility fall if something's wrong? Right. Where does credibility go? Where does credit go to work, whether that's art or something like that, if we're just outsourcing all of it.
And this is maybe a hot take on my part. And I think that part of it is like when we're talking about AI, the research maybe is not all there yet because it's so new. But I feel like I'm seeing when we're relying on AI or doing things quickly or having shallow answers and thoughts to things, that leads to long-term insecurity. It leads to, like, to play out your email scenario, even Alex, like, can I write an email to my kid's teacher without help? Not that you would think that, but it's just, that's what those things can lead to. It can lead to a lot of imposter syndrome. Like, do I belong here? Because I know where I got my information and I know that I just like read the cliff notes on this and everyone thinks I'm smart, but I know where I got that. Yeah. And so I think it's leading to lack of confidence, insecurity. Where is my identity? Can I handle this? Do I belong here? Like, it goes back to like our core, like, am I known? Like, people don't know me things. And so when we just stay surface, man, I feel like we're missing a lot. And my thought would be there will be more to come on that in the future as far as research goes.
Speaking of wanting to fact check things, one of the things I read in a book recently, and I think is fascinating, was that from the University of Irvine, California, that it takes 23 minutes to regain the same level of focus after you're distracted by something. So they gave the example of if you're in a meeting and you get a text message, it takes 12 seconds to respond to it, maybe even 4 seconds if you use one of the automatic yes or something like that on your phone or your watch. But then to regain the level of focus that you had in that meeting on a certain thing, if you were deeply focused, it takes 23 minutes and 15 seconds, really, is what the stat says. And I've been like thinking through that and like, that, no way. Like, there's just no way it takes me 23 minutes and 15 seconds to re-engage in that level of focus. But then the other part of me is like, but how focused was I even deeply into something? Like, how often am I deeply feeling like I'm focused on one thing, like whether it's a meeting, thinking about the next meeting, or thinking about earlier in the day, what I had, like, it's very often, I mean, not very often that I feel like I am like sunk in, mind locked in on one thing only. Like that my mind's not floating between tasks and shifting and doing all of these things. And some of that's I'm probably conditioned because of constant interruptions. Like I've got 3 devices right in front of my face that all can give me a notification.
Yeah.
Like I can get my email or my text or on all 3 devices right now, whether that's on my watch, my iPad, or my iPhone. And so it's just that balance. And how much of that is just human, nature, that for hundreds of years, people have been in a conversation, but also thinking about, okay, my chores later, the things coming up and all that. And so that stats just kind of had me like, I don't think so.
I mean, I could see it, because I think when I'm kind of in that flow state of working on something, let's say, it's getting late in the day and I'm working on a project and I'm really focused in on it. If I have to leave that project, I'm kind of in a bad mood. Like my brain just is struggling to let go of it, and to think, oh, I got to come back to this tomorrow is really frustrating. It's maybe there's some autism there I'm dealing with. I'm not sure, but I get really fixated on something and I can't. It like frustrates me to get pulled away from it. Like I want to finish that task or whatever. But I do think that's true. And so when you live throughout your whole day, if it's your work day you're looking at or whatever, and you're constantly being distracted, and then you're like, okay, well, I'm going to leverage these tools that are available to me to get through these moments. But like you said, Alex, I'd question that too. Like am I ever that locked in if I'm just constantly bouncing from one thing to the other?
Well, no doubt these tech companies know that this is real, because most of them are building in focus modes and all these kinds of things inside of devices where they're like, okay, we kind of created an issue that they realize, and they're like, one of the best ways to do this is focus mode, or I don't know what Google calls theirs, but just these moments where you're like, just turn off distractions, And so I'm trying to get better and better at actually using that during it, but I always find an excuse for like, oh well, like what if this what if that one time somebody runs into my house, I need it on my Ring camera and I miss that notification, or whatever. So then I'm always like, but what notifications do I actually need to let slip through the cracks, or what person? And so it's just this constant.
Right, is allowed to get through do not disturb mode. I recently had to look this up because I had a client in my office, and I think it was on Apple that you can see how many times a day your phone got unlocked, and it was like 400 times that this person's phone had gotten unlocked. And so I looked up, and it was the average person unlocks their phone 180 to 205 times a day, which averages like we're checking our phones like every 5 to 10 minutes. So it's like a trained thing. So like in the psychology world, they would say that like attention is not necessarily, it's not a personality trait. It's a skill that we learn, that we develop. And so I think a lot of times, like, we're not going to sit here and diagnose you, Eric, with autism, but we're saying like it's a skill, right? Like we're talking about like a skill that you want to like focus or something like that. But there is like, it's part of our culture where it's like, hey, I know that this is a skill, and like I'm going to snatch this from you because I want this to be built in over here looking at your phone or doing something else.
Yeah. So one of the things that I'm curious about is multitasking. And is that a myth? And I think cognitively, I think there's a difference between, okay, one of the things I do that's just cathartic every Monday and Wednesday before we play the infamous noon ball is I get a mop and I clean the gym floor before anyone gets there. And it's just literally, I don't put my headphones in. I'm just doing it. So that's like a 15-minute thinking space that I like create. I've just created this rhythm, and it's a thought space. So it's not like when we talk about multitasking, it's not that I can't be doing the dishes and listening to a podcast, but it's where your mind can actually be locked in at once. And so, and there's studies out there that say at the end of the day, cognitively multitasking is impossible. Like you can't actually be focusing on multiple things at once. And one of the things that happens is like our computers, like we keep getting better at having multiple things open, multiple browsers, multiple, like that's what computers and chips are trying to do. Like how much power, computing power can I have to do all this at one time, but our brains haven't evolved, you know, in 40,000 years and or way longer than 40,000 years. The human brain is not continuing to evolve at the rate computers are. And so I'm curious, Jess, from like a
female
side, or just
'cause
even psychology. People talk all the time about,
I know.
I'm so good at multitasking.
Yes. And when we were talking about this earlier, I was like, this is something that I find that a lot of women, like including myself, have said, like, I'm a great multitasker. It's kind of like your identity to some degree, that you have this ability or that you can do this and you can like be productive at a high level. And so I think when you break it down like that, Alex, like that, like we're jumping in from one task to the other, that's multitasking. And then I had to do a little more research. So you pushed me a little bit to be like, well, what is that? Because I feel like I identify with that word multitasking, but I think like thinking a little deeper, which we should all be doing, right? If we're listening to this podcast, we want to do.
That's the problem. We're trying to figure it out.
Yeah.
Something that like but it helps me understand myself a little more, even in this area where it's rapid task switching. So that's like where when we feel like we have these tabs open where, I can bounce from one to the next, like our brain isn't necessarily focusing on all those tabs. We're aware that they're there, but if I can jump in between them, that's different than multitasking. Or one for me that I really identified with was cognitive load management, where it's like I can manage and organize and think about, like, have my tabs open of like I can jump from home to the grocery list to childcare. You guys could say something that's like, oh yeah, I need to put chicken on my grocery list and come right back. But that's not me multitasking. That's me like popping into tabs. And I think that just thinking about it that way, where it's like we glorify this side of ourselves, I think, as women, where it's like, yes, I have to like do this and do more, and to just, I guess, simplify a little bit and say like, this is what we're doing, and seeing that true multitasking we can't necessarily do, and to let that, I guess, guide us into, okay, what do we need to be focusing more on versus popping in and out of all these tabs that we have open. But I do think that this is a place where a lot of women, including myself, can take a lot of identity. And it's like, hey, maybe we need to slow down and look a little bit more at that. And maybe you're more stressed, Jess, because you think you're doing this.
Well, I think it's interesting you bring up identity, because I do think that there's a correlation here. And I think the busyness side of it is we're not thinking less because we're busy. We're busy because we're avoiding thinking. Like, we don't want to be left in that silence. We don't want that downtime because of there's things we might have to face that we don't want to face. Mm-hmm. And then in America, especially, it's so you're praised, and like if your identity is busy, like if every time you someone asks you, how are you doing? Oh, I'm busy.
Yeah.
We're so busy.
Yeah.
And it's like you're deflecting because you don't know what this person's going to ask of you. Are they going to ask me to do something? Are they going to ask me to go hang out with them? Are they going to, and if I say I'm busy, maybe I can avoid it. Mm-hmm. And I think there's so many things that when we're really trying to look at our identities, technology can either help or hurt that, or like what we do in the modern age can threaten it. And okay, so think of what are the things that sometimes people identify with. If you're a writer, you're threatened by ChatGPT because you're like, okay, it's trying to replace me. If you're an artist, you're threatened by AI art. If I think of like my dad and my brothers who were like, they pride themselves in cars, gas-powered automobiles, and being able to drive them and maneuver cars really like. And then now there's autonomous vehicles, and it's like, well, that's threatening to those people because it's not like what they identified with. That's taking away something that I pride myself in. Or there's just so many aspects of that are tied to our identity that I think when you start to see who you are, you kind of have to peel all those layers away and go, am I who I am because I have all the answers? Am I who I am because I'm busy? What makes me me? And a lot of times it isn't these things that we are kind of just forcing in there. It's really like, it's my ability to sit with someone and be present. It's my ability to care for someone uniquely the way that I can care for that person. It's my ability to think and process things in the way that I do. God's gifted me with these abilities. And it's like, if we can find that time to lean into our giftings and our identity isn't about things that can, like, if your identity is built on something that can burn or go away, like, it's not your identity. You know, and I think that's the one thing we have to think about. Like, if this can go away tomorrow, like if you're a Disney adult and all of the Disneyland and Disney World burned down, like, what are you? You know what I mean? Like, I think a lot of times we build these ideas of who we are based on something that can go away. And so that's where we get into this mess of being overwhelmed and stressed. And all that.
Yeah, I think, we can often think, this is obviously a 2026 problem, AI. We've got death by push notifications, all that kind of stuff happening in us, but really it's a human problem. I think one of the stories in Scripture that kind of identifies this issue is that the story of Mary and Martha, when there's the opportunity for just sitting at Jesus's feet, right? And there's always people, are you a Mary? Are you a Martha? Are you just being busy doing stuff, performing, that you're missing out like on the fact that like Jesus is in your midst and you can slow down and build time, have time for relationships, or you're just always trying to get something done, or are you taking that time to pause? And, and Jesus calls that out. Like, you're worried, you're distracted about so many different things, and you're missing me in the middle of this. And I think through our inability, to think deeply, to carry on deep conversations, all of the costs, that it costs us in our inability to do these things. I think it's a human problem, being distracted. And I'm not, there's, the old adage, I don't know who said it, if the devil can't make you bad, he'll make you busy. And okay, there's some corniness to that, but I think there's also like some truth to that.
In it,
like he doesn't, you don't need to be out there sinning all the time or doing these bad things, but oftentimes it's our busyness that distracts us from Jesus right in front of us. Or not just Jesus, my kids right in front of me, or my wife right in front of me, the team, that whatever it is, like it pulls me away from people. And that's what we're designed for, is relationships with people. And I think that's one of the realities that we find in Scripture and all human history.
Well, I think if you're taking pride in being busy, you're taking pride in your inability to be present. Like, if that's what you're saying, like, I'm so busy, I'm so this, like, okay, well, then you might as well be bragging about not being able to be present with people around you, the people that matter. That's really what you're taking pride in. And then the fact that we build that on us as a culture, you feel guilt when you're not busy. You feel guilty when you are just existing with friends and family. And it's like, that's not right. That isn't like, that's not what you're saying, even in that you're reading in Scripture. Like, it just doesn't equate.
This is like one of the times where I'm just thinking about, I've had several people that I've worked with that one of my goals for them in working with them weekly is, I want you for the next 6 months not to say yes to anything, but to say no to to extra things in your life, if it's extra volunteering or whatever. And it's just like building in practices like that that will fit for in your life to help you to do that. There are ways to do that. There's ways to build that in, but it is uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable to ask somebody to do that and to actually participate in that. But I think too that's where the change comes is it's not easy. Like what we're talking about, and maybe building more attention and building more into that. There is a cost that comes, and it's in negative, but there is going to be a cost that we'll find to change it too and to improve it.
I think one of the things that I've noticed that maybe more culturally in our inability to think deeply or to actually sit with a thought, to take time to research something out, to pray about it, to actually dialogue with other humans about a problem you're going through instead of asking Google or AI or these types of things, is our inability to really see nuance inside of things. And I think we talk about this oftentimes on the podcast, or people will talk to us about it. Like they're like, I'm mad because there was too much nuance there, or you didn't just land on one side or another side. And we see it all over our culture. There's just this inability to, like, I was even watching an interview with Ben Sass lately, a senator, former United States senator who's dying of pancreatic cancer and a lot of other cancer. And one of the things he talked about, because one of his goals inside of the Senate was to figure out, how do I actually live in a moderate way, and how do I bring people together, and how do I do all of these things? And he's like, and the reality is, in our current I left politics because that's impossible.
Yeah.
Like, it's impossible to live in nuance. It's impossible to have real conversations. Like, even if you want to in your private life, we're just forced to make ourselves feel tribal and do all of these types of things. And so in our culture, it's just, everything is a hot take. It's outrage. It's you either or, like the ability to think both and to say perhaps, it seems like such a lost thing.
And it goes back to what Jess was saying earlier. We're looking at everything in sound bites. So the algorithm is rewarding certainty and not wisdom, right? Like, it's rewarding hot takes and not the ability to think deeply. And I think as we get into spiritual formation, if your thinking is shallow, then your faith is going to be shallow too. And I don't think a lot of times people want to admit that. They might be like, well, I've been a Christian for years. And yet they think their thinking is so shallow and surface level that they want everything to be cut and dry and simple to digest. Well, if that's the way you go through your life, that everything is cut and dry and it's a simple answer, that's the way you're going to view your faith too. And you're not going to be comfortable when you're faced with difficult, paradoxical kind of anomalies you would discover in Scripture. You're going to be frustrated with it because you've conditioned yourself to be like, I'm a simple thinker. Even though you wouldn't want to admit that, you would probably argue that if someone told you that outright. Yeah. But really, that's where you are. That's your baseline is a simpleton. And it's I'm saying that in not like a combative way. I'm just saying, like, we've proven as a human race that that's what we are rewarding. And social media is proof of that the algorithm is constantly rewarding that person that's going to give you a definitive answer to something. But yeah, I mean, speaking of that, I mean, how do you think shallow thinking affects how people read the Bible? I mean, is that something we're seeing today in the church? How do we engage with that? How do we help people move past it and really be comfortable wrestling with things that maybe don't have simple answers?
Yeah, I mean, I think in faith, it's we're in an age of a lot of deconstruction, and I think you can see a lot of that is a reflection of kind of what you were talking about, Eric, a shallow faith, or not necessarily that person's faith being shallow, but a shallow teaching, and we're developing a shallow faith in somebody. So when they have a tough question or they're going through something difficult in life that is a really difficult diagnosis, or they're going through a difficult divorce that wasn't their fault, or just a situation that wasn't all roses and simple and easy, and then all they've had is like, hey, Jesus is here to make your life easy. And that, we don't often say it like that, but when they hit a rough patch and they haven't really wrestled through these types of things, death happens. I mean, death happens to all of us, but it's just one of those great equalizers that oftentimes will reveal what our faith is in, or even the way we pray. Like oftentimes, prayer is a deeply profound thing that we've oversimplified in some ways. Like for most people, if you ask them, what's prayer about? Well, it's me talking to God and telling him what I want, and it's like, okay, well, if God gave you everything you were praying about, would the world actually be a better place? Yeah. Like or are you just creating, a world that's better for you? And then also, man, how shallow is it to like trust in a sovereign God that reigns over all, that rules over all, and to say, I think you're so limitless. You flung galaxies and stars together, and yet I want you to be my genie, and that's such a shallow way of thinking about it. And that's just something like prayer. That doesn't even talk about like other aspects of faith and theology that require a lot of mystery and doubt and living in the perhaps and all of the mystery of that. And so there's so much about our faith, I think, that can like you were saying, Eric, if it's a shallow faith, if we're unable to think deeply through these types of things, challenge things in our faith, then it becomes difficult.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times, again, we outsource our faith to AI answers,
the algorithm.
or even just a person. Like, well, Tim Keller, I like him. So what's Tim Keller have to say about it in his book? So we've even done that before. The algorithms there is like, I don't want to think about it. I trust that this person is more educated. And I'm not saying we shouldn't go to talk to educated people. That's one of the reasons we love to bring Dr. Carl Pagenkamper on here and all those things, people that are experts in a field, but a lot of times we'll lean into an expert to do our thinking for us and to just trust that without actually having to wrestle through it or have that dialogue. And so even before an algorithm, books and those types of things were that. Publishers essentially were an algorithm before.
Yeah.
And so,
I would agree. But I think what's different with a book is like they did the deep thinking on the front end. They wrote this book. They put it out there. You have to read it. You have to wrestle with it. Right. Then where with social media, you've got these people who, again, I know we're beating this dead horse, but it is this hot take, outrage, certainty driven machine where that's what people are going to. And they're like, okay, well, if this Christian influencer says this, then I'm probably going to agree with them. Right. And I don't have to think anymore. And it's the same as like when you lean on AI and you don't want to think critically, you just go to that and get your answer. And so we're kind of living in this weird, gross place where people aren't allowed to have opinions. And like, even I think this is one thing, and I'm going to try to avoid getting too political here, but I think one of the things that frustrates me so much right now is I've found myself more in the place of in the middle of everything than I've ever been. And I think it's because I've been consciously trying to get there. Like, okay, see both sides every time. Like, try to look at both sides of this thing or that thing. You know, did Donald Trump actually think he was a doctor in that AI image that he shared on Truth Social, or did he think he was Jesus? Which one? You know, all of these things. And I'm trying to see both sides of these arguments. And I think when you do that, you almost find this peace in going like, yeah, maybe on everything, you know, like people might be telling the truth, people might not be, but if you're willing to accept that maybe someone's telling the truth about something, or maybe someone is lying about it, but you can kind of rest in that and think critically and just form your own opinion about it instead of just jumping to the first opinion that feels good to you, it makes it more challenging, because a lot of times we're so tribal. We're like, oh, well, my friends think this way. And if you think differently, well, then you can't be in my friend group. And then you're alienating people. You're alienating free thinking. You're alienating the ability to have to wrestle with that. And then you build these little echo chambers where you're only surrounded by people who think one way, and you don't welcome other thoughts into that community. And it's like, I don't want to live there. I feel like I've lost family and friends to that type of thinking where I've been like, no, I'm right, and you got to think the way I think. And I don't want to live there anymore. I don't want to alienate people because I disagree with them. I want to understand why I disagree with them and not just be told why I should disagree with them.
Yeah. And I think the wisest people I know that the more they know, the more they realize they don't know. And it's just a reality. And you know, especially in faith, you think about these two intersections of grace and truth. And if sometimes it feels like they're polar opposites, but there's just this mysterious nuance between them. Or justice, like God is fully going to bring justice to every wrong that's ever done. And yet God offers mercy. And he gives, like, that is such a mind-boggling thing, or to think that God is sovereign over everything. There's not a hair on someone's head that God doesn't know about, and yet we have responsibility over my life, and I make my own choices. And so there's all sorts of camps you can land in all those spaces, but the more you like study both of them, and the more you're seeking certainty in some ways, the more uncertain you become. But then, like you're saying, but the more comfortable you are living in that uncertainty and relying on faith. And yet there are things that we are very certain of. And so I think that is one of those things that, especially in our faith walk, becomes a big part of what spiritual maturity ends up looking like, and being able to admit that. And I think, If you want to think shallowly, you just avoid those tensions. If you want to think shallowly about grace and mercy, about who God is, you just avoid those tensions inside of those things. But mature thinkers wade in it. They think about it. They talk about it. They wrestle through it. They admit, I used to think this, and now I'm being persuaded to think this. And then now I'm being persuaded back to think, and it's just, that's not weakness. And a lot of times I think we think being persuaded into anything else is weakness.
Yeah.
That's really good. I also think that like we obviously like have all done our own work in our own lives to try to be more humble and to be good listeners and learners. And that's not something that's always easy. And I think, you know, when we have guests on, yeah, maybe sometimes that might sound to our listeners like the easy button, but we really are, we want to be learners. Like we want to take that posture of, hey, yeah, you can definitely like help handle some weight on this episode, but man, I want to like, I think that the part that we try to really display is that we're asking questions and we're talking to people that are also doing what you're saying, Alex, like they're mature, they are sitting in that tension with us and they're not defensive. I think that's a huge thing that comes out of when we're not focusing or we're not like having a more open mind or seeing different sides like you're talking about, Eric. We sit in that defensive-ness and we lose that connection. And I think one thing that we get to do weekly is put that aside for ourselves and practice that and to have conversations with each other where we don't all always align and we don't always have the same thoughts. But I think that hopefully this can in some ways be a model of what it looks like to think a little deeper an hour-ish a week. And then how does that apply to your own life? But I think it's a choice, right? We could let Carl run the whole show and be like, all right, good answer. And we could talk about it and it displays a lot in him and in what we attempt to do.
Yeah. Well, I think back to some of my favorite interactions I have with human beings, whether that's friends or coworkers or family or whatever scenario. And it's those moments where it may not even seem like an iron sharpening iron situation, but it is in a subtle way. It's like maybe I have formed an opinion just because of something I heard a snippet of, or I heard an argument made and I just believed it out, blindly. And then you just regurgitate that in front of someone who is more educated on that topic, and then they can present you with a different argument, a different perspective, and then you have to make a choice in that moment. Like, do I just double down in my ignorance and go, oh no, you don't know, I heard this thing, or do I listen and let that soak in for a minute and go, okay, I didn't think about it that way. Like, I'm not sure I'm ready to agree with you on that, but I am feeling challenged and I want to like learn more. And I also can realize that I don't have all the answers. And I'm not saying, oh, look at me, I'm so smart, I'm so good at that. I just think the more I allow myself to do that, the more fulfilling life becomes, because it's like I am creating real relationships with people who disagree with me, who don't think the way that I think. And it is something that it can be more uniting. It can lead to a more peaceful worldview, and you don't feel like you're just constantly in defensive mode all the time. But I think as we talk through this and we cover this, there's a lot to unpackage, but like what's the way forward? How do we continue to cultivate a deeper life, whether that's through our faith, through our relationships? What's that way forward?
I just have to say that I think that both of you guys have just shared great examples of like what moving forward looks like. And so even just Eric, what you shared about seeing different people's viewpoints is so practical. But I would say like when we want to rebuild and have a deeper life, it's also realizing what I said earlier. It's that attention is a skill to be worked on. It is not part of our personality. So it doesn't mean that your brain is broken or there's something wrong with you, but you're being overstimulated and your brain is purposely having its attention drawn from it because of the distractions of this world. And that continues to be that way. And so a good way of doing this is just even a few minutes of focused attention begins onto one thing, helps retrain your brain in that skill. So that could be setting a timer for 10, 15 minutes, or even doing a task like, hey, when I'm mowing the lawn or when I'm mopping the gym floor, I'm going to be thinking about this one thing or listening to this specific thing. It's taking time to build another rhythm. And then I would say just creating good focus windows where when we removed the distractions, maybe that's closing a door. That's what I tend to do, because what I talked about earlier is I have a lot of access points. And so simple ways of focusing are what is an access point that is taking too much of my time and attention. For me, I still want to be around people. I still want people to feel like they can talk to me, but sometimes that looks like closing your door, turning off your notifications, putting your phone in another room, things that are practical. It doesn't have to be this like massive thing where it's like, okay, I'm not going to look at my phone at all today. Well, you've already created a hill that's so high to climb up in a day. So it's doing little things
It's
that
like
create
not
rhythms.
achievable.
Yeah.
You're making a goal that's not achievable.
Yes. And oftentimes I think about when you go to the gym, like you're not just going to go and be like, yo, I'm going to lift 300 pounds today. You start at maybe 50 pounds, you start at 60 pounds, and you build your reps to get better at this. And so realizing that thinking deeper, like moving into better rhythms, is a skill that requires rest. You guys have any other thoughts around?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, some of my most productive thing, like I realized there was a couple of years I was doing CrossFit, like for a workout. And the thing that I loved about it was mindless in the fact that I could just go to the gym. Somebody else programmed it. They did it. They just told me what to do and I did it. But the thing I hated about it was that all of the movements I would have to learn. I didn't do them very often. I didn't think about it. I'm doing it in a loud environment with other people that are relying on me. And my mental focus on that had to be so locked in or I'm going to get injured. And like, I went away from I was doing a lot of more steady state cardio, running and things like that. And then I realized, I need both of those in my life. I've got to build muscle, but I also need moments where I can just go to the gym and do something mindless, or I can go on a run, and I wouldn't do that often. And I got back into running and I'm like, man, some of my most productive thought times are when I'm literally just running and I don't have other things happening inside my life. And so for me, even things like that became a big deal. Sleep is one of the most foundational things, I think, in our ability for our brain to actually shut down and reset and rest. And you can find probably a lot of sleep studies on this, like how deeply impactful, how it is the baseline for our brain and being able to use it and function in a way that is healthy and resetting that baseline every single day. It has to recharge. Our brains have to recharge. And if you don't get good sleep, if you're constantly thinking, you're doing those types of things, then you're just setting your brain up to consistently fail. And so I think some of those things that seem almost too easy. Well, yeah, you need good sleep, but maybe you need to measure if you have no clue if you're getting good sleep, if you're waking up restless and all those things, there's devices you can get to measure, am I actually sleeping well? Like putting my phone away, not having it, blue light and those types of things an hour before bedtime, like all of those things that seem like people are talking about it all the time. There's a really good reason for it because it really does affect the way that our brains are functioning, and how optimal your brain function is going to feed into how deeply you can think, how productive you can be, how much you can get into a flow state or not into a flow state.
When I think back to all the times even on the podcast, we've talked to experts on stuff or other experts, whether it's the best doctors, the best scientists, the best historians, the best, you name it. One of the things that they tend to have in common is that they are willing to admit they don't have all the answers, even though they are probably considered by their peers to be the best. And I think one of the things from that I'm realizing is that our egos kind of sort of like they thrive in distraction. Our egos are kind of built in that distraction, or even the access to information we have through technology where we can instantly have an answer, and it makes us kind of convince ourselves that we're so smart and we're intelligent and we have all the answers. But I think where we can find transformation is is investing in those reflective moments. And that comes at a cost,
Absolutely.
right? Because it's time, and time is valuable to us. But I think we're going to find the life that we want a lot of times, whether that's the relational lives, the spiritual life that we want, kind of hidden in the boredom, hidden in those moments where we think, wow, what am I doing? I'm so bored. I need something to distract me. But I think that's where you're going to be able to have self-discovery and learn about yourself and reflect and become the person you want to be over becoming this kind of avatar of who you think you should be, that you present to everybody around you as like, oh, I know it all, or I'm this, or I'm that. And I think that's where ego thrives, where if you really want to strip that away and be the best version of you, you have to welcome in boredom, welcome in silence, wrestle with reflection and those types of things. It's not easy to do. And I don't think any of us here are saying we're the role models for it, but I think we're all trying to discover how we can be better at it.
And I think Jesus modeled that. And I think that's one of the things we see. If there's anybody that could get a pass on, I don't need to spend any time reflecting or in prayer and silence and solitude with the Father because, I'm God. Like he could have probably had a pass on it, but instead he modeled getting away and having moments of solitude, having moments of silence, spending time with his Father, checking in with his Father about his will versus his Father's will, because even he had desires, longings as being a human that were outside of what he knew the Father wanted to be done. And so he submitted to, the Father's will. And so I think Jesus gives us, not just a template, but an example of we need to do this on a daily basis in our lives and get away from that. And I think the other thing is just there's even simple things like I'm rereading a book by a guy named Joshua Becker. He was a guest on the podcast once that talks about minimalism. And a lot of times we think about minimalism, getting rid of a bunch of stuff, but he makes so much of the conversation, because we're putting a cohort out on the app about not living cluttered lives, and that's physical space, it's digital space, all those things. So go find it on the app and join it. It starts next Monday. But the more I'm rereading through that, the more I'm being reminded of, like, even when things are in order in a physical space, how much my mental space feels like it's in not cluttered. Like when my desk feels cluttered and I'm working on something, which oftentimes it does. Like there's moments where I just got to pause and I got to put all of this stuff back in order for my mind to be able to focus, because that clutter creates clutter in my brain. So even simple things like that, but it's also that idea, like you were saying, Jess, don't go to the gym. It's great to have a goal to lift 300 pounds. Yeah. Sure. Don't go to the gym thinking today is my day when it's my day one. It's like do one thing at a time today. And then stack that tomorrow, and then stack that tomorrow. And I think that's why it's called discipline. It's not easy. And so to get ourselves out of this stuff, I think is going to take probably more work than we want to admit, and probably more work than a lot of times we want to put in to actually find the freedom that's on the other end of it.
Well, if it's like you're just looking for that next step, find your 15-minute MTF moment, right? Mop the floor.
Yeah.
That's just, but really it's practical. Like find that
true.
Space where you can have that silence and choose not to put the headphones in and choose to just sit with your thoughts.
And the research shows that small, consistent changes rewire your brain. So one of my favorite phrases is baby steps still move you forward.
Yeah.
So it's thinking, what's one small change that I can do this week? What would life look like with more mental clarity? And what might God say to us if we slowed down and listened and paused and didn't just read through something and move to the next thing?
Yeah.
What if my car ride was silent this week?
Yeah.
I spent that time. There's so many different, like, where could you find 10 minutes? This week or every day this week to just try it. And it's probably going to feel weird and awkward, and
I would even encourage people, and maybe this doesn't sound Christian, but maybe don't go into it with a super spiritual, hyper spiritual motivation. And I don't mean that to say you shouldn't be seeking God in it, but I think it's kind of the same analogy of going to the gym and trying to lift 300 pounds on your first day. If you haven't had a practice of this, don't go into it with like, I'm going to go meet the face of God right now in this 10 minutes. just let your mind wander. And then, because if you haven't taken time to hear his voice recently, you're not going to know what his voice sounds like that first time you take those 10 minutes out of your day. Like, take those 10 minutes, let your mind wander, just let it go where it goes. And then, you do that for a week, a month, maybe you're starting to recognize God's voice where you hadn't heard it before. Maybe you had been hearing it and didn't realize that's what it was.
Good.
All right. I think we covered as much of this as we can. Thanks, Jess. Thanks, Alex. Thanks to all of our listeners out there who are listening. If you have any questions, concerns, or advice for us, send them in to the podcast. We'd love to hear from you. You can reach out to us on Instagram or TikTok at CCCOMA Podcast, or you can send us an email to podcast@cccomaha.org, or leave us a voicemail. We haven't had a voicemail in a while. We'd love a voicemail. So you get to hear your voice on the podcast. It's like you're a guest. Maybe you're an expert in something and you want to share your expertise with us. That's 402-885-9930. But until next time, we'll talk to you then.